Good evening, everybody. How is everybody doing? Um, I am working on a new setup slash studio for these live streams, as you can probably see. I'm in the process of reconfiguring this area of my house into basically a composing and broadcasting studio where I will be able to do teaching from as well as broadcasting. So, um, uh, make sure everything's coming in correct. If you can hear me, go ahead and say hello. Looks like for some reason people dropped out right as I started. I'm just wondering if that's a weird thing on YouTube's end. But hello, and tonight we're going to be talking about historical wind instruments as well as the whole recorder family. And as always, we will, you realize there is about a 30-second delay on everything. Hello, Puccolo, Saxophone Man, and Livid Physics. All right. So, yeah, tonight's going to be kind of a broad base where we're going to talk about basically any woodwind or brass instrument that has not fallen into the categories that we've discussed in the past few weeks, and historical instruments. Before we start, there is one really big issue that needs to get discussed is can historical instruments be played alongside modern instruments? And by and large, the answer to this is generally no. And there's some reasons for that. But it looks like I've got some questions coming in. Would the Dulcian be considered historical? Absolutely. The Dulcian's heyday was 1700 and before. You'll see some Dulcian usage in the early 1700s. Bach will still use it occasionally. There's also some Spanish usage that goes into the late 1700s, as well as surprisingly some Mexican usage of the Dulcian. But yeah, so Dulcian gets considered that. Shawms, Crumhorns, Rauschpfeifen, a whole bunch of stuff there, and we'll kind of what is Opo Neon on the sax? I mean, I play sax. I've got like 3 sitting in front of me that you can't see, and I've got another 4 or 5 in the back room. No, I don't have that many. But yeah, no, I play sax. All right, so I think what's the difference between a sackbut and a modern trombone? All right, let me grab a trombone real quick. Okay, so I happen to have a trombone sitting on the bookshelf behind me. That's my score shelf right there. So that's all of my orchestral and band scores. So this is not technically a modern trombone. This is a 1920s Bisher. This is a small bore trombone. This is probably around a 5/100ths of an inch, so about half an inch bore size. A sackbut is going to be, so this is 0.5. A sackbut's probably going to be about 0.4. So a lot smaller. And this is small for a trombone. Also, the bell size here. Do I have a... I do happen to have a ruler right here. Helps to have a messy house sometime. So this bell is a 7-inch bell. A sackbut's bell is going to be about 4 inches. So this is 7 inches here. And then the sackbut's bell is about 4. It's only about this big. So that's, yes, I do have a clarinet in the background. That is a G clarinet. So the board, what's opinion on Baroque bassoon and or Baroque contrabassoon? I did quite a bit of study of Baroque bassoon in grad school. I did about a semester or so's worth of study on it. It is a very different instrument than the modern bassoon. Technically, a Baroque bassoon should only have 4 or 5 keys. The instrument I had was a Merc. So it was a 6-keyed. It was probably more authentic to an instrument from the very early classical era. But I played it okay. It's a very different playing instrument than the modern bassoon. I didn't know you played trombone. And then, of course, Helicopter says, I don't. But, Helicopter, how do you know I don't play trombone? I can play it a little bit. Let's see if I've got any chops here. Why is that? Okay. This trombone, by the way, sucks. Yeah, and so it's getting. Let me try that again real quick. But yeah, I can play trombone a little bit. That's the excerpt from Brahms Symphony 1. It's really hard to hit a high A right on when, one, you're not a trombone player, two, you haven't warmed up, and three, it's a freaking high A on the trombone. Where's Richard Bobo? I don't know. He's his own man. He lives like 300 miles from me. Let's see. Do I see any potential for the revival of the Ophicleide in Ensemble Beyond Hip? Well, let's see. So, Ophicleide. So, yeah, Ophicleides are pretty much hip. So it's historically informed practice, if you don't know, or historically informed performance. So yeah, this is the Ophicleide, and this is one that gets asked about a lot. And is there a place for it outside of hip performance? So, yes, but most likely no. Yeah, there are going to be some Ophicleide players out there who are going to be commissioning new works. Most likely, these are going to be chamber works. So, think pieces for 4, 5, 6 players. And there is always potential for their use in a larger ensemble, like an orchestra or a band. That said, your inclusion of an Ophicleide will absolutely limit your potential. By the way, I have gotten better on the Ophicleide since the last you heard. So yeah, that's a little Ophicleide there. So does it have potential? Yeah, I think everything has potential. Whether you're going to see it. Oh, so yeah. I probably should have moved the microphone back. The E flat, there's a reason the E flats are peaking the mic, and that's because the E flat key is so the ophiclide is not fully directional. The E flat key is right here. The microphone is right here, so it goes directly to the mic. Guys, be nice to one another. Let's see. Thoughts on the Chalumeau. Okay, so this gets into some issues. When we're talking instruments like the Chalumeau, instruments that are precursors to our modern instruments, they are really there only for the historical stuff. You cannot mix and match historical instruments and modern instruments. And at least we can't mix classical and Baroque instruments with modern instruments. Some romantic instruments, like Offie here. By the way, Offie's name is actually Hector, so this is Hector. And the reason we can't do that is, by and large, tuning. So most Baroque instruments are going to be tuned to about A415, means they're going to be half a step lower. Even those tuned at A440 have a different scale. We use equal temperament today, but in the Baroque era, there was a whole list of different kinds of tunings: Werkmeister, mean tone, Pythagorean, and so. We can't take a Baroque or a classical instrument and play it in a modern ensemble and assume that it's going to work. Classical instruments, by and large, are tuned to about A430, so between half a step lower and today's modern pitch. Where did I get my ophiclide? This was actually donated, believe it or not. And I can't really go into too much more detail other than it was donated. Okay. Hector is pretty much brand new. It's a Chinese clone. And it's a conversation piece. I kind of wish I had it last year. Our local community chorale did Middleson's Elijah, and it would have been great to do it. So let's see. Record. Is there a recorder that goes to F1? So let's see. We've got recorders here. I've got my whole set, and my largest here is a bass. So this is a bass recorder. It goes to F3. So you're asking about an instrument 2 octaves lower than this. Petzold, I believe, does make one. I believe that is the largest recorder that they have made. So it's an octave below the contrabass. So he goes bass, and then the next one down is great bass, then contrabass. And then, so the contrabass will go to the F right below the bass clef, then subcontrabass, and then another size of subcontrabass. But Petzold does make one. What are your opinions on tenor sax? I mean, it's a saxophone. I play tenor sax. Tenor sax is actually the one I play the least. There are fewer opportunities for me to play tenor than any of the others. Opinions on the crumhorn. Okay, crumhorns are interesting. I played some a bit in grad school. I played a little bit of Richard Sopranino 2 weeks ago. Crumhorns are fascinating. And when Richard and Jared and I were talking the other day, I think they're right. There is a place for a cylindrical bore double reed instrument. Probably not in the crumhorn style. It would need to be keyed, and I think you can get rid of the silly J shape. So yeah, no, sans the not that I know of. The lowest recorder I know is the Renaissance style sub great bass that goes to B flat 1. Maybe other subcontra bass recorders do. No, the Petzolds do. And the Renaissance style subcontra bass Big Babe is a 466 instrument, so it's actually half a step higher. So its lowest note concert pitch is a B natural. I hate recorder. I played in primary school. There's nothing wrong with recorder, and I'll show you here in just a second. Why is there no baritone? Yeah, baritone is a newer name that came about after the Renaissance instruments were developed. Recorder is not a kid's instrument. Oops. No wonder I'm using... that's why it doesn't sound right. I have two alto recorders here. The one I was using is a German system fingering, and this is the Baroque system. That's why it didn't sound right. And the high F on here doesn't like coming out. But yeah, no, recorder is not a kid's instrument. In fact, recorder is very, very difficult. I would highly suggest you go check out Sarah Jeffrey's channel, Team Recorder. She is a phenomenal recorder player. Her videos are just excellent. And go check her out. She is by far the best recorder channel on YouTube, bar none. I love the recorder family despite their limits. I prefer the German system. I don't. You can't do as much on the German system. It's not as friendly to chromatics. I have an ocarina that sounds good. Anything about them? I've never really explored ocarina before. They are, yeah, it's something I would need to explore. They're so non-standardized that it's hard to get a grasp on. Saxophone man, never pass judgment until you know something completely. Recorder is used in primary school because it's not very hard to grasp the concept of playing on. You just blow into it. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons. Is I can just blow into here, and it produces a... if you blow into it correctly, it produces a pleasing sound, and I don't have to worry about a reed. I don't have to worry about any moving parts. It's just there. I recently used a Merck Rotenberg Alto and Maple, and I really like it. Yeah, I used a Merck, wasn't Maple, it was, but it was Rotenberg, and was Rosewood. I used Merck Rosewood in college, in grad school. Oh, yeah, and then, yeah. Yes, Sarah's channel is fantastic, and I would not be lying if I said I kind of had a little bit of an internet crush on her. But, you know, there's that. Everyone in my primary school played recorder, but I never heard it being played like that. Listen to it more. Listen to Handel sonatas for alto recorder, Vivaldi concertos for sopranino, consort music. Throw in the CPE Bach trio sonatas for bass recorder. So not J.S. Bach, but CPE, his son, one of his sons. All right, so yeah, since I've got recorder out, recorder is probably the instrument that has the most potential for use in a band or an orchestra. So the instrument I have here is an alto recorder, known as a treble in England, and this is one of those weird linguistic things. I don't know why one group calls it a treble, one group calls it an alto. The one most everybody is familiar with is the soprano, and this is actually just a standard student model, but I'll play the same thing. That's the Bach Brandenburg Concerto number 2. And I'm a little bit rusty, but yeah, that's the soprano, and that's much more akin to what you typically hear. We can go up another step to the sopranino, which is even smaller. I'll play the same thing. So this is an octave higher than the alto. If a recorder had a cylindrical bore, would it sound any different? Interesting question. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a... recorder is so easy to play. Saxophone Man, no, it's not. What I just played is difficult. So what I have here are two fipple flute instruments. They're the same essential length. The recorder has the reverse conical bore. And then I have here a B flat. Actually, no, I want to use the C. I want to use the C tin whistle. And you can absolutely hear a difference between the bore of something that is cylindrical and the bore of something that is reverse conical. All right, Saxophone Man. This stream is about historic instruments. You got silenced last time you were in here. If you get silenced again, you're banned from the channel. I can't play sopranino. My fingers are too thick. You just kind of have to relax the fingers. But of course, yeah, there is the Garkline, and here is the Garkline. This is by far the most difficult of them. That's the lowest note. And so I'm not going to go any higher, but it can. In fact, I can actually play just as high on the sopranino recorder that I can on the Garkline. And that's one reason the Garkline is kind of silly. You don't need it because I can play just as high on here without the fingers. We can go one size bigger than the alto. We've got our tenor. And the tenor has an absolutely beautiful sound. And the high notes on these just don't come out perfectly. But yeah. And then the bass, and I'm not going to play my bass too much because it's not in really good shape. Let me put these back on stand. You need tips on your sax playing. Go find a saxophone teacher. That's what they're there for. Take private lessons. Do you know any instruments, historical or modern, that play in the whole tone scale? No, I don't. The whole tone scale is what we call a synthetic scale. It's made up, basically. It's not a natural scale. Uh, there's a couple of Chinese traditional flutes I've been interested in. I've seen few claim to have Western tuning on eBay. The Zhao and the Gudi. I don't know those. I know the Z. I've got a whole set of them over there. But yeah. So let's go ahead and finish it out. I've got the bass flute. The bass flute does not work very well. Bass recorder, excuse me. It had some severe damage when I initially got it, including somebody who had drilled the hole through it. But let's see if I can play a little bit. And it's also in German system. Yeah, and so the lowest notes do not come out at all. Yeah, and so this is a very, very poor instrument. The keys are in bad shape. So yeah. So potential for the recorder to use in yeah, there's plenty of saxophone teachers in London. Also, why are you up at this time, saxophone man? It's the middle of the night in London. Go to bed. All right, saxophone man, you are gone. Sorry. All right, so off a glide. Yeah, the instrument left. Yeah, that's my offie, off a glide. Yeah, the reed organ. Yeah, the bass recorder is just pretty terrible. I got it really cheap on eBay, and it's just bad. So anyway, so let's talk potential of recorder in a wind band or an orchestra. Surprisingly, they have been used. Interestingly, you go back to the Baroque era, and a lot of the orchestral music in the Baroque era would have recorder parts in them, and the recorder parts could be used alongside traditional traverso flutes or just by themselves. And it was very often that you would have recorder parts. Bach used them quite a bit in Brandenburg Concerto No. 2, and I think one other. Maybe, is it 4 or 5? No, it's not 1. I know it's not 6. I can't remember. But yeah. So Bach would use it. Handel would use it all the time. And then it died out. There's a couple instances. Mozart would use it once. I think Weber used it once in the early Romantic era. But it died out, and partly because they never developed a key system. So it would be absolutely fascinating to take an instrument like this and start adding keys to it. So, I mean, there's some really simple ones you could do. You could add a pinky key here for C sharp. This is a F alto recorder, so 3 fingers is C sharp key here. All I know about scoring and arranging for them is that the pitch rhythmic ornaments stand in for wider dynamic range to extent. No, that's not correct. Rhythmic ornaments are there for articulation. They are not there for dynamics. And so, yeah, talking about that is one thing. You cannot really alter dynamics much. There are a few ways. So, if I blow harder onto the recorder, it raises the pitch. If I blow softer, it lowers the pitch. So I'm going to play a C, and I'm just going to blow normally, and then I'm going to slow it down. So there's no crescendo decrescendo. It's a glissando down or a glissando up. And in order to do that, what you would do is you would play a slightly flatter or a slightly sharper fingering, and then blow that extra harder, and it would effectively be somewhat louder. There's another technique that I'll do that will soften the pitch a little bit, and I'll put my teeth into the windway. And that does a little bit. It's not perfect. I can also, if I cover up the fipple here, I can soften it a little bit, but not much. If I cover it up too much, though, nothing comes out. So you have to have it clear. But that's because recorders can't do a big dynamic contrast. It is much more difficult to score for them because they're not going to blend. They're going to stand out much more as soloists. It could be useful for microtonal music, absolutely. So recorders could do microtonal stuff easier than some of the other woodwinds because of the completely open holes. So in many regards, the simpler the mechanism, no keys on this instrument, the actually more difficult the instrument becomes, but the more freedom you have on it. I have toyed with the idea in the past of using a section of recorders in a wind band piece. It's something I may return to at some point. The problem is finding the players within the ensemble to take care of them, and how are you going to use them? And there's no good answer to any of those questions. It would be interesting to have them as a contrast to the flute sound, but that's be interesting. All right. So keep the questions coming. We'll move on from recorders, kind of go into some of the other woodwinds. Shawms are the predecessors of the oboes. They're very, very loud instruments. A friend of mine yesterday morning or the day before sent me a picture he had of a whole family of shawms, including a great bass that's 9 feet tall. I'd love to see some of those getting used. But those are really more period instruments. Start asking about some of the other things. So dulcians is another one. Dulcians are the predecessors of the bassoon. They came in an entire family. The most commonly used was the bass dulcian, which is what evolved into the modern bassoon. There's also the great bass, which is a fourth below that, and the tenor, the fifth above, an alto, and a descant. The descant would essentially be a soprano bassoon. Such an instrument was very rare. Typically, if you were looking at dulcian music, it was mostly basses, tenor, a great bass, occasionally an alto. There are a few extant contrabasses that are the same pitch as the contrabassoon, though they are much smaller in size because they don't descend to B flat, so they don't need that extra tall bell. That B flat is one of the reasons that the contrabassoon is made folded over. A contrabass dulcian is only about 6'6", about a little over 2 meters tall. And that's doable. That's humanly playable. Concert flutes sometimes miss the airy sound of other flutes around the world. It's part of why I got interested in alternate head joints for concert flute, like 12-tet shakuhachi. Yeah, so you can get a shakuhachi head joint for flute. They're becoming more and more seen. The one that's really becoming seen is the glissando head joint, the Robert Dick flute whammy bar, basically. Um, but Dulcians really are not something that you're going to use in a modern wind band or orchestra, simply because they're not tuned to our modern scales. Yeah, you can mess around with it, but natively they don't like it. Um, I could see like a an ensemble of dulcians being used for something like call and response. Like if you want to do something really heady and esoteric, have like off stage the sound of Renaissance instruments. Um, and that would be interesting. Sweeter, what didn't you know about? Um, but yeah, let's see. What else do we have in the way of historical woodwinds? Not. There's not a lot else out there that really gets into now. Some of the historical brass is a little bit more interesting, I think, and some of them may have a bit more potential. Um, Natural horns and trumpets. If I wanted to score, say, a bassoon quartet with those instruments, how would I inform the players what instruments? Do you think just saying tenorune would be good, or would I need something else? If you're scoring a bassoon quartet, it's either four bassoons or three bassoons and a contrabassoon. That's your bassoon quartet. You are not, unless you know the player, unless you're doing something very specific, you are not scoring for tenor bassoon, or aka tenorune. Oh yeah, the glissando head joint. Yeah, they are very expensive, but they're very well made too. Um, uh, so yeah, bassoon. There have been a few bassoon quartets done with tenorune on top. There's a well-known trio by Victor Bruns. It's tenorune, bassoon, contrabassoon. One of the earliest pieces for the modern tenorunes. Earlier you mentioned taking the curve out of a crumb horn, but would it be really be a crumb horn anymore? No, it wouldn't. It would still be a cylindrical bore double reed instrument, um, but it would no longer be a crumb horn. It could be considered a Rauschpfeifen or a Rauschpfeife. Um, there's a couple other instruments that could be considered, but no, technically it would not be a crumb horn. Yes, that is an Ophicleide behind me. This is Hector. Hector made an appearance earlier in the stream. But yeah, let's go ahead and we can go back to some of the historical brass stuff. Uh, the fingerings are not really insane, bassoonist one. Actually, if since you're a bassoonist, go find a an alto recorder, and you will find that the fingerings are the same. Like in the upper register, C, D, E flat, just like on bassoon. The fingerings between alto recorder or any of the F recorders in bassoon are as similar as you'll get, which is why bassoon players often make great recorders. Rauschpfeifen have conical bores as far as I know. Then it may be something else. There's another Renaissance double reed that has a cylindrical bore, and I can't remember what they are. Okay, the loud shams used in Catalan outdoor dance music ensembles could be a good solo color in a loud ensemble. Absolutely. So those are fantastic instruments to talk about. So the Catalan shams, the tibble, and the tenora. If you want to go look these up, go and type in Cobla on YouTube, Cobla, and the sound from the Catalan street bands are just incredible because the main melody section is four shawms against trumpets, valve trombones, the fifth horn, the bass flugelhorn, and a double bass. What fingering system for the alto recorder? All of my instruments are Baroque system. Baroque system is the standard. You don't really want to mess with the German system. But yeah, the Catalan Shams would make for a very interesting addition into a wind ensemble or an orchestra. They would be very, very loud though, which is something you just don't expect out of double reed instruments. I've heard of a Japanese flute that is played on the side like a sea flute. No, not off the top of my head, Helicopter. I cannot remember what they're called. There are so many different types of flutes from all sorts of Asian cultures that any more that's just it gets too many, and sometimes you kind of have to simplify. So, yeah, the Shams stand up great with the fist corns. Yeah, double reed day this Monday is University of Michigan. What university is that? Double reed days are always fun. We never had any at my universities. The professors were always just working and playing too often to organize something like that, but it would have been so much fun. Yeah, so since I've got Hector sitting here in my lap, we can talk historical brass. So, Off of Clyde, we talked about a little bit earlier. There's absolutely some potential for the usage of this because it can be played at modern pitch. It can be played modern tuning system, assuming you can actually play it in tune. The predecessor of this is the Serpent. That gets a little dicier with the Serpent. And it could be used again, but you're not going to see it too much. It doesn't really have the projection. It's a very quiet instrument. And some of the other things you'll see are natural horns and natural trumpets. Those will get used every now and then. I actually kind of like the idea of starting beginner horn players at least on a natural instrument. To really teach them fundamentals of harmonics, hand position, and not have to worry about manipulating the left hand at all. It's actually a really good pedagogical technique. What is the lowest note on the ophicleide? The lowest note on this instrument is an A1. This is a B flat ophicleide, and I will see if I can play it. The lowest register is actually very difficult for me to play. There's a reason the ophicleide did not survive well as a bass instrument. It's actually far better as a tenor instrument. It's just really, really weak in that range. Also, I'm not a brass player. Yeah. So, by and large, though, the takeaway on a lot of this is period instruments, historical instruments, really can't be used well with modern instruments, with a few exceptions. Instruments like the recorder, these are actually designed to play with modern stuff. But you can also get a recorder in Baroque tuning, which is A415, which is half a step lower. Some people would call that so this is an alto recorder in F, one in Baroque pitch. You could call an instrument in E. The problem is that it's in E with modern pitch, but it's not E modern intonation. I was really about to say, as an X-horn player, I don't like the sound of naturals, but when you mean... I get what you mean about beginners, though. Children especially tend to have an unbalanced view of vowels versus lips. Yeah. Pedagogically, I think it makes more sense to get the fundamentals of the natural horn first before you add in the vowels. But that's really the only brass instrument where that works well on. I remember that you've mentioned the key work of the Orthoclyde. Yeah, what about it, Helicopter? It's awkward and stupid. It is by far one of the most illogical key systems that exists. Literally, the key work on the Orthoclyde is they put the key touch as close as possible to the tone hole, regardless of order. So, first finger is A, okay. Second finger is B, okay, fine. Third finger is C sharp. Fourth finger is A flat. And we get, So A, B, C sharp, A flat. Yeah, that doesn't work so well. G, F, F sharp, E flat, E. So yeah, there's no order to it. Yeah, that's coming from a bassoonist. And because I'm a bassoonist, I can wrap my head around the fingering system a little bit better than tuba players or euphonium players. But still, it's... you can probably even hear a difference there. I'm going to back away from the mic a little bit. The best sounding note will be anything in the B flat series. I tried a very nice 2-valve Gibson bass trombone yesterday. I didn't sound all too good, but those pedal notes, fun. I managed to get a G1 by lipping down with slide nearly all the stocks U-song valves. Okay. I expected the Orthoclyde mouthpiece to be larger like a tuba. No, it is not. In fact, the Orthoclyde mouthpiece is smaller than a trombone mouthpiece. So this is actually a small bore tenor trombone mouthpiece. This is a box 6.5 AL, and this is the Orthoclyde mouthpiece. And you will notice that the Orthoclyde mouthpiece is considerably smaller. In fact, the Orthoclyde mouthpiece is much more along the lines of an oversized horn mouthpiece. Deep cup here, basically a funnel, and yeah, the Orthoclyde mouthpiece is like a horn. The trombone mouthpiece is actually much more like a giant trumpet mouthpiece, a cup shape here. But this is funnel shaped. So you'll get a very different sound. Everything on the Orthoclyde is conical from the mouthpiece through the instrument. Pedal tones are the best part of playing bass trombone. Do not neglect the upper range of the bass trombone. The upper range and middle range of the bass trombone is where you make your money. Yeah, everybody likes playing the low notes, but you got to have that nice solid middle range. You've given me an improved impression of the tenor range of the Orthoclyde here tonight, but I've always had like euphonium, but worse view of it. Well, it is euphonium-like. I hesitate to ever say anything is worse. it's different. It will have different qualities, and the even the best ophicleide player is going to know that different notes on the instrument sound different to one another. On a traditional brass instrument, every note is completely closed. There is no place for the notes to escape other than from the bell. On an ophicleide, every note except notes on the B flat scale escapes somewhere along the instrument. The actually, I take that back. Everywhere except the A fundamental series. So the A fundamental series. So even the B flat is escaping here, and so the more holes it's coming through. So if I do the A flat fundamental series, this is going to sound bad. It's not a good note on the instrument. And it doesn't even want to speak properly. It's so bad. Which is why we only use that for that note, and we don't use... Yeah, it's uneven notes. My lesson teacher spent a whole 2 weeks with me working on my top notes, F3 to middle C. That's not even your top notes. You still got another octave to go. So F3 is the F in the staff. Middle C is the... No, middle C, of course. And then bass trombone should still have another octave. So, yeah, you need to be able to play all the way up to B flat or C above the staff. I've heard of a completely cylindrical brass instrument. I can't remember what it's called that has only odd harmonics. Completely I don't know one. Every brass instrument I know has all the harmonics. I'm trying to think even how that would be possible, and I don't know. You wouldn't have any kind of bell. You wouldn't be able to have any kind of bell flare on it, and so yeah, I don't know. All right, so we'll take a few more questions. And this is going to be a shorter one tonight. I've got to remember that I cannot do these as long as I did last week. Okay, yeah. I think I missed... So, yeah. So, octavier, yeah. Bass trombone needs to be able to play up there. That is totally within the repertoire. Particularly if you're doing something that was written for 3 tenor trombones, like all the French music. They were not writing for bass trombone, so stuff like Ravel or Debussy. Most of the early Stravinsky stuff, he's not writing for bass trombone. It's all tenor trombone. And so if it gets played on bass trombone, it needs it needs to have the range of the tenor. Okay, so I'll take a couple more questions, and we'll wrap it up here in just a few minutes, and just make it close to an even hour, but... Yeah, like I said, the takeaway is historical instruments are great for historical purposes, but bringing them into modern ensembles is difficult. It can be done, obviously, but it's a lot more to be made there. To get an idea what that would theoretically sound like, compare a synthesized square wave to a sawtooth wave. I'm interested in that instrument was ever actually made. Oh, didgeridoo. Yeah. I can get my didgeridoo. It's sitting across the room. I can see it. Yeah, but no, didgeridoo. In fact, let me go grab it real quick. And yes, you are right. Okay, didgeridoo. Man, this thing needs to be re-waxed. I've had this so long. Oh man, you're in bad shape, aren't you? But anyway, yeah. So you're right, helicopter. Let's So yeah, there's um, the fundamental, which is about D. Um, and this is really cracked badly. Um, it's a flat 12. So yeah, it you're right. It does that. It's one of the few instruments that does. One of the last wind instruments I'd expect me to own. It's literally the first wind instrument I ever. No, it's not. It's the second wind instrument I ever bought. I bought this my freshman year of college. So I've had this nearly 20 years now. I bought a bugle back in high school. No, I have never talked to Trent before. Um, so I watch all of his videos, but I've never really talked to him. Trent has much more of a brass band background, and brass band is not something that really exists here in the United States outside of a very few specialized ensembles. I actually know of two in the area, and I've got to see both of them before. But yeah, all right. So, any other questions tonight, guys? If not, we'll wrap it up. And what if we do mallet percussion next week? I think mallet percussion would be fun. I've been doing some research into that the last few days, and I am getting closer to the completion of Symphony 4. And so I should be doing hopefully in the next couple weeks, I should be able to do a complete presentation on Symphony number 4, which is just about done. I'd say 2/3 of the way through with the last movement that needs to get written. That's movement 2, which I'd save for last, and movements 1, 3, 4, and 5 are finished. So, but also I will try and work this week on the upcoming composition courses. Would I do strings one day? Helicopter, I am not fully qualified to talk on string instruments. I think that's better left to a string player. Yeah, New Orleans style brass bands are. I can't even really call them a true brass band. They're a jazz band. So, anyway, guys, if we don't have any more questions tonight, we'll go ahead and say adieu. And see you next week. We'll talk mallet percussion. So get all your mallet percussion questions ready. And if all goes well, it'll be next Thursday because I have company coming in on Friday. So, all right. I will see you all next week.